Uhud is a massive feature lying 4 miles north of Medina, the reference point in Medina being the Prophet's mosque, and rising to a height of about 1,000 feet above the level of the plain. The entire feature is 5 miles long. In the western part of Uhud, a large spur descends steeply to the ground, and to the right of this spur, as seen from the direction of Medina, a valley rises gently and goes up and away as it narrows at a defile about 1,000 yards from the foot of the spur. Beyond this defile it shrinks into nothingness as it meets the main wall of the ridge. At the mouth of this valley, at the foot of this spur, the Prophet placed his army. The valley rose behind him. He organized the Muslims as a compact formation with a front of 1,000 yards. He placed his right wing at the foot of the spur, and his left wing at the foot of a low hill about 40 feet high and 500 feet long called Ainan. The Muslim right was safe, but their left could be turned from beyond Ainan. So to meet this danger, the Prophet placed 50 archers on Ainan, from which they could command the approaches along which the Quraysh could maneuver into the Muslim rear. These archers, under the command of Abdullah bin Jubair, were given instructions by the Prophet as follows: Use your arrows against the enemy cavalry. Keep the cavalry off our backs. As long as you hold your position, our rear is safe. On no account must you leave this position. If you see us winning, do not join us. If you see us losing, do not come to help us. The orders to this group of archers were very definite. Since Ainan was an important tactical feature and commanded the area immediately around it, it was imperative to ensure that it did not fall into the hands of the Quraysh. Behind the Muslims stood 14 women whose task it was to give water to the thirsty, to carry the wounded out of battle, and to dress their wounds. Among these women was Fatima, daughter of the Prophet and wife of Ali. The Prophet himself took up his position with the left wing of his army. The Muslim dispositions were intended to lead to a frontal positional battle, and were superbly conceived. They gave the Muslims the benefit of fully exploiting their own sources of strength, courage and fighting skill. They also saved them from the dangers posed by the Quraysh strength in numbers and in cavalry, the mobile maneuver arm which the Muslims lacked. It would have suited Abu Sufyan to fight an open battle in which he could maneuver against the Muslim flanks and rear with his cavalry and bring his maximum strength to bear against them. But the Prophet neutralized Abu Sufyan's advantages and forced him to fight on a restricted front where his superior strength and his cavalry would be of limited value. It is also worth noting that the Muslims were actually facing Medina and had their backs to Mount Uhud. The road to Medina was open to the Quraysh. Now the Quraysh moved up. They established a battle camp a mile south of the spur, and from here Abu Sufyan led his army forward and formed it in battle array facing the Muslims. He organized it into a main body of infantry in the center with 2 mobile wings. On the right was Khalid and on the left Akram, each with a cavalry squadron 100 strong. Amr bin al-As was appointed in overall charge of the cavalry, but his task was mainly that of coordination. Abu Sufyan placed 100 archers ahead of his front rank for the initial engagement. The Quraysh banner was carried by Talha bin Abi Talha, one of the survivors of Badr. Thus the Quraysh deployed with their backs to Medina, facing the Muslims and facing Mount Uhud. In fact, they stood between the Muslim army and its base at Medina. Just behind the Quraysh main body stood their women. Before battle was joined, these women, led by Hind, marched back and forth in front of the Quraysh, reminding them of those who had fallen at Badr. Therefore, just before the women withdrew to their position in the rear of the army, the clear, strong voice of Hind rose as she sang, "O you sons of Abduddar, defenders of our homes, we are the daughters of the night. We move among the cushions. If you advance, we will embrace you. If you retreat, we will forsake you with loveless separation." It was the morning of Saturday, March 22, 625, the 7th of Shawwal, 3 Hijri, exactly a year and a week after Badr. The armies faced each other in orderly ranks. 700 Muslims against 3,000 unbelievers. This was the first time that Abu Sufyan had commanded in the field against the Prophet, but he had able lieutenants and felt certain of victory. The Muslims repeated to themselves the Quranic words, "Sufficient for us is Allah, and what a good protector He is." Quran chapter 3, verse 173. And they awaited the decision of Allah. The first event, after the forming up of the two armies, was the attempt by the knave to subvert the Aus. This man stepped forward ahead of the front rank of the Quraysh, along with his 50 followers and a large number of the slaves of the Quraysh. He faced the Aus and called, "O people of the Aus, I am Abu Amir, you know me." The reply from the Aus was unanimous, "No welcome to you, O knave." This was followed by a shower of stones hurled with great delight by the Aus at the knave and his group, under which the group hastily withdrew through the ranks of the Quraysh. Observing the look of derision on the faces of the Quraysh, the knave assumed a prophetic posture and observed, "After me, my people will suffer." But the Quraysh were not impressed. After the encounter of the knave, the archers opened up from both sides. This was a kind of artillery duel between the 100 archers of the Quraysh and the Muslim archers, who were either in the group on Ainan or dispersed along the front rank of the Muslims. Many salvos were fired. Under cover of the Quraysh archers, Khalid advanced with his squadron to attack the left wing of the Muslims, but was forced back by accurate fire from the Muslim archers. As the archers' engagement ended, the song of the Quraysh women was again heard on the battlefield. "We are the daughters of the night." The next was the phase of duels by the champions of the two armies. Talha, the standard-bearer of the Quraysh, stepped out of the front rank and called, "I am Talha, son of Abu Talha. Will anyone duel?" On his challenge, Ali strode out, and before Talha could deliver a single blow, Ali struck him with his sword and felled him. Talha was only wounded, and as Ali raised his sword to strike again, Talha begged for mercy. Ali promptly turned away. Later, however, while the general engagement was in progress, the wounded Talha was dispatched by the Muslims. On the fall of Talha, another infidel came forward and picked up the Quraysh standard. This man was killed by Hamza. As Hamza killed him, he was noticed by the savage who stood behind the Quraysh ranks. Stealthily, the savage began to move towards the right in order to approach Hamza from a flank. Hamza was easily recognized by a large ostrich feather which he wore in his turban. Now the duels became more general. One after the other the relatives of Talha picked up the standard, and one after the other they were killed by the Muslims, the largest number falling before Ali's sword. Abu Sufyan also rode up to duel and was faced by Handala bin Abu Amir, who was dismounted. Before Abu Sufyan could use his lance or draw his sword, Handala struck at the forelegs of the horse and brought it down. Abu Sufyan shouted for help and was assisted by one of his companions, who engaged and killed Handala. Abu Sufyan withdrew hastily to the safety of the Quraysh ranks. Another Quraysh warrior who came forward was Abdul Rahman, son of Abu Bakr. He stepped out of the front rank and gave the usual challenge, whereupon his father Abu Bakr drew his sword and prepared to move forward from the Muslim position to fight him. But Abu Bakr was restrained by the Holy Prophet, who said to him, "Sheath your sword." This Abdul Rahman was later to become one of the most valiant warriors of Islam and acquire glory in the Muslim campaigns in Syria. Soon after the duels, the fighting became general and both armies were locked in fierce hand-to-hand fighting. The Muslims were superior in swordsmanship and courage, but these advantages were offset by the numerical superiority of the Quraysh. As this general engagement of the main body progressed, Khalid made another sally towards the left wing of the Muslims, where the Prophet stood, but was again driven back by the Muslim archers on Ainan. The Prophet himself participated in this action by firing arrows into the general mass of the Quraysh. Beside him stood Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, who was an arrow maker by profession and was among the best archers of his time. The Prophet would indicate targets to Saad, and Saad would invariably score a hit. Hamza was fighting near the left edge of the Muslim force. By now, he had killed 2 men and found a third one approaching him, a man named Sabah bin Abdul Uzza, whom Hamza knew well. "Come to me," shouted Hamza, "O son of the skin cutter." The mother of Sabah used to perform circumcision operations in Mecca. The color rose in Sabah's face as he drew his sword and rushed at Hamza. As the 2 men began to duel with sword and shield, the savage, crawling behind rocks and bushes, approached Hamza. At last he got within javelin range and with an experienced eye measured the distance between himself and his victim. Then he stood up and raised his javelin for the throw. Hamza struck a mortal blow on the head of Sabah, and Sabah fell in a heap at Hamza's feet. At this very moment, the savage hurled his javelin. The cruel weapon, thrown with unerring aim, struck Hamza in the abdomen and went right through his body. Hamza turned in the direction of the savage and, roaring with anger, took a few steps towards him. The savage trembled as he waited behind a large rock, but Hamza could only take a few steps before he fell. The savage waited until all movement had ceased in Hamza's body, and then walked up to the corpse and wrenched out his javelin. He then casually walked away from the scene of fighting. He had done his job. The savage would fight more battles in his life, but there would be no more battles for the noble Hamza, lion of Allah and of his Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Soon after this, the Quraysh army began to waver, and the Muslims pressed harder in their assault. When several Quraysh standard bearers had been either killed or wounded, their standard was picked up by a slave who continued to fight with it until he too was killed and the standard fell again. As it fell, the Quraysh broke and fled in disorder. There was now complete panic in the ranks of the Quraysh. The Muslims pursued them, but the Quraysh outran their pursuers. The Quraysh women wailed when they saw what had befallen their men. They also took to their heels, and raising their dresses in order to be able to run faster, gave a fine view of their flashing legs to the delighted Muslims. All the women ran except Amra, who remained where she had stood, close behind the original Quraysh battle line. The Muslims got to the Quraysh camp and began to plunder it. There was complete confusion in the camp with women and slaves milling around, hoping not to be killed, while the Muslims rifled everything they could find and shouted with glee. There was now no order, no discipline, no control, for the Muslims felt that the battle was won. The first phase of the battle was indeed over. The casualties had been light, but the Quraysh had been clearly defeated. They should have marked the end of the Battle of Uhud, but it did not. As the Quraysh fled and the Muslims, following in their footsteps, entered the Quraysh camp, the 2 mobile wings of the Quraysh stood firm. Both Khalid and Akram moved back a bit from their previous positions, but kept their men under complete control, not permitting a single rider to retreat. And Khalid now watched this confused situation, looking now at the fleeing Quraysh, now at the plundering Muslims, now at the archers on Ainan. He did not quite know what to do, but he was capable of a higher degree of patience and waited for an opportunity which would give him a line of section. Soon his patience was rewarded. When the archers on Ainan saw the defeat of the Quraysh and the arrival of the Muslims at the Quraysh camp, they became impatient to take part in the plunder of the camp. The Quraysh camp looked very tempting. They turned to their commander, Abdullah bin Jubair, and asked for permission to join their comrades, but Abdullah was firm in his refusal. "You know very well the orders of the Messenger of Allah," he said. "We are to remain on this hill until we receive his orders to leave it." "Yes, but that is not what the Messenger of Allah intended," the archers replied. "We were to hold this hill during battle. Now the battle is over, and there is no point in our remaining here." And in spite of the protests of their commander, most of the archers left the hill and ran towards the Quraysh camp, shouting, "The booty! The booty!" Abdullah was left with 9 archers on the hill. This movement was observed by the keen eyes of Khalid, who waited until the archers had reached the Quraysh camp. Then Khalid struck. He launched a mounted attack against the few archers who remained on the hill, with the intention of capturing this position and creating for himself room for maneuver. Ikrimah saw the movement of Khalid and galloped across the plain to join Khalid's squadron. As Khalid's squadron reached the top of the hill, Ikrimah's squadron was just behind, while Ikrimah himself came ahead and began to take part in the assault on the Muslim archers. The faithful archers who had remained on the hill resisted gallantly. Some were killed, while the remainder, all wounded, were driven off the hill by the assault of Khalid. Abdullah bin Jubair, defending to the last the position which the Prophet had entrusted to him, suffered many wounds and was then slain by Ikrimah. Now Khalid's squadron, followed by Ikrimah's, swept forward and came in behind the line that had been held by the Muslims an hour ago. Here the two squadrons wheeled left and charged at the Muslims from the rear. Ikrimah with a part of his squadron assaulted the group which stood with the Holy Prophet, while Khalid's squadron and the remainder of Ikrimah's squadron attacked the Muslims in the Quraysh camp. Khalid drove into the rear of the unsuspecting Muslims, confident that having taken them unawares, he would soon tear them to pieces. But the Muslims refused to be torn to pieces. As the Quraysh cavalry reached the camp, there was an uproar in the ranks of the Muslims, and a few of them lost their heads and fled. Most of them, however, stayed and fought. As long as the Prophet lived, these men were not going to acknowledge defeat. But as the Muslims turned to fight the Quraysh cavalry, Amra rushed towards the Quraysh standard which lay on the ground. She picked up the standard and waved it above her head, in the hope that the main body of the Quraysh would see it. By now Abu Sufyan had regained control over most of the infantry. He saw the movement of the cavalry. He saw the Quraysh standard waving in the hands of Amra, and he got his men back into action. Knowing that the Muslims had been taken in the rear by the cavalry, the Quraysh rushed into battle once again, shouting their war cry, "O for Uzza! O for Hubal!" The Muslims were now caught between two fires, the Quraysh cavalry attacking from the rear and the bulk of the Quraysh infantry attacking from the front. Abu Sufyan himself charged into the battle and killed a Muslim. The situation soon became desperate for the Muslims, who broke up into small groups, each fighting on its own to repel the attacks of the cavalry and infantry. The confusion increased, and in the dust a few of the Muslims even began to fight each other. There was some alarm, but still no panic. Losses began to mount among the Muslims, but they held out, determined to fight to the last. At about this time, Khalid killed his first man, Abu Asira, with his lance and knocked down another Muslim. Believing him dead, Khalid rode on. But the second man was only wounded and got up to fight again. The battle was now divided into two separate actions. There was the main body of the Muslims holding out against the main part of the Quraysh army, and there was the group with the Holy Prophet holding out against part of Ikrimah's squadron and some of the Quraysh infantry which had returned to attack him. Now began the ordeal of the Prophet. When the